Habit number 5, have you heard the prayer of St. Francis? These words sound pretty familiar, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? He says, don't listen. Now he gets into listening skills, which is great for pastoral counseling, right? When you listen to another person, don't be thinking, when they're talking, don't be thinking about, okay, what am I going to say as soon as they stop? No. He says, don't listen with the intent to reply. Don't be thinking about what you'll say. Don't pretend to listen to that person, which is tempting for all of us in certain situations, right? The other person is talking, and we're sort of thinking about something else. Our eyes are glazing over and we're looking at that person, but we're really not listening to that person. Don't selectively listen, coming in and out of the conversation. He says, instead, try to be an empathic listener. Listen with the intent to understand. When you're listening to that person talk, try to really hear what that person is saying and how that person sees the world. That's what I was trying to do with Raphael. Raphael was telling me that there's a young woman in this picture. I wouldn't see a young woman. You know what? I'm going to try to understand here what she's saying and how she sees the world. Because another person's words tell us about them and how they see the world or how they see the situation. He says, listen with your ears and your eyes. That comes back to last week. We were talking about listening skills. One of the skills was to keep eye contact. Vincent raised a great question, right? Do I really have to listen with eye contact? Because I have to keep my eyes on so many other things, which is fine. But when you're listening to that person, and that person sees you looking at all other things, what is that person thinking? That's okay, Vincent. I see you're busy. I'll find someone else to talk to.
Look at the watch.
Yeah. When you look at the watch, what signal does that give that person? Yeah, I'm listening to you, but yeah, how long is this going to take? Because I have other things to do. Stephen Covey says, listen for feeling, meaning, and behavior. So when a person's talking to you, it's not just listening to their words. Words are one thing, but also listen to what's behind those words. Listen to their feelings. Can you hear what they're feeling? Can you hear what they're trying to say? Can you take a look at their behavior? Psychologists are great at this because they'll take a look at anyone who's in any certain way. They'll tell you how it is that you could read that body language, how open or not that person is, right? Read their face. What is it you can tell about, just not, their words will tell you one thing. Their behavior will give you more information. He says, satisfied needs don't motivate. And so if a person is talking to you, listen for unsatisfied needs. Think about that for a moment. That person wouldn't be talking to you unless there were a need to talk to you. So what is that need? What's at the bottom of that person coming to you? Can you imagine a doctor prescribing you medication before the doctor even knew what's wrong with you? Just walks into the room and before he says, hey, how are you feeling today? What's wrong? And if he just walks in the room and says, yeah, I'm writing you a prescription for this. Wait a minute. How do you know what's wrong? Stephen Covey says the same when we listen to other people. He says, diagnose before you prescribe. Make sure you really listen to that person before you respond. And diagnose that person's need. What is the need that brought that person to speak with you? He says we listen autobiographically. In plain English, we listen based on our own experiences. I hear you through my own experiences. And so we all listen autobiographically. When you're telling me about your story, I'm imagining it through my own experiences in my own life. And so he says we tend to respond in 4 ways. What are 4 different responses? We evaluate the person. We can either agree or disagree with that person. Raphael and I, we were disagreeing about that picture. We probe. We ask questions from our own frame of reference, right? I'm asking, the questions that I ask tell you something about me. I'm trying to understand your situation. He says, we advise, we give counsel to other people based on our own experience. What's the challenge with that? The advice that I give, it's good for only my experience. You follow me? I can tell you what I would do in that situation, but you know what? I'm not in that situation. Your advice comes from your experience. So your advice, our advice, doesn't necessarily work with other people. You follow me? That other person has to figure out what works for him or her in this situation. And finally, he says that the other way of listening and responding to a person is that we interpret. We try to figure people out based on our own motives and behaviors. Danger, red flag is going up, right? Because I'm trying to understand you through my own behaviors, and my own motives, my own experiences. So, Stephen Covey talks about the 4 developmental stages of active listening. Since this is a course in pastoral counseling, I think this is so hugely important, which is why we have Stephen Covey's book as part of this course. When you're listening to a person, what are the 4 stages of listening so that we can all listen at that highest level? The first level is simply to say what they said, to mimic the content, right? If they say, okay, this is the example they're going to use. A child comes to you, imagine it to be your own child or grandchild or nephew, niece, friend, someone at church, and on Sunday tells you, I've had it. School is for the birds. Okay? The first level of response then, mimicking content, saying what they've said, would be for you to say, boy, you've had it. You think school is for the birds, right? Okay, you're just repeating back to them what they said. Follow me? That's the first level of listening and responding. Follow me? First level is just repeating back what they said. We ready for the second level? Second level is not simply repeating what they said, but rephrasing what they said, trying to put it into your own words, right? What they said was, I've had it with school. School is for the birds. Rephrasing it, the second level now, is putting it into your own words and saying something like, sounds like you don't want to go to school anymore. Oh, okay. You're using different words. You're not just repeating what they said. Stage 2 is you're being able to put it in your own words. You're understanding. Stage 1 to stage 2. Are we ready for stage 3? What is stage 3 of listening and responding? Stage 3 is reflecting the feelings. So you're not just listening to the words, but you're trying to hear the feelings that are underneath those words. So you're both rephrasing the content and you're listening for the feelings. So they say, I've had it. School is for the birds. Okay? Rephrasing the content and trying to capture their feeling might be a response like, you're really feeling frustrated. And what are they probably going to respond? I am. Right? What you're doing is you're helping them to identify the feelings that they have. You show that you're listening, but you're not just listening to the words, you're also listening to the feeling. That's stage 3. Stage 4 then of active listening, he says, is reflecting the feeling. Reflecting the feeling and rephrasing the content, it seems it should be. So that school is the content, right? What they're really talking about is school. That's the content of the conversation. The feeling is frustration. So a response might be something like, not simply, you're feeling really frustrated, but it sounds like you're really feeling frustrated about school. And that opens the door to conversation, you follow me? Because you're showing that person by how you responded that you're listening to them, you heard the content, the words, but you also heard the feeling behind those words. And if we get it wrong, if we say, it sounds like you're feeling frustrated, but they're not feeling frustrated, they'll let us know. Follow me? He says that when we seek to understand other people, then when we really listen to them and try to understand them, we help the other person to work through their own feelings, and we also gain their trust as listeners because they're coming to us to listen. Follow me? We're not solving their problems for us. We're simply feeding back to them the content and the feelings. And it's building trust between the two of us. It's building that relationship. So Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand before being understood. But then this is a good one, especially for preachers now, or teachers. Any of us who express ourselves, any of us who are talking to children or parents and want them to understand what we're saying, God says, okay, we want to understand first, listen. But when you want others to listen, Okay, when you're preaching on Sunday, he says there are three things you should think about. If you want to be understood, you should think about your ethos, your pathos, and your logos, three fancy Greek words meaning what? Ethos, how credible are you or not? Because if you're not credible, people aren't listening. Follow me? Number two, think about feeling, because if we're just talking, if Father Jamie were to do this whole class in a monotone voice, without any feeling, it would become very boring very quickly, if you know what I mean. Right? So he says, if you want to be understood, if you want other people to understand you, then there has to be that feeling injected into it. And the third point, logos, is simply the logic of it, helping people to follow along the logic of it. Father Jamie's not just talking, right, because he's talking and likes to talk and he could talk for 20 minutes on end. No, how am I helping people to follow my thought? In preaching, we often say, for instance, right, say what you're going to say, and then say it, and then say what you said. Follow me? It's helping people understand, okay? So that when you're done speaking, you're trying to help them as active listeners to take away that message. People, we are trying to understand others and be good listeners, but also when we're talking, how do we help others to understand and take away, to listen to and take away what it is that we say? Money?
Understand their level also, because you can use some words that they don't know what you're talking about. But like frustration, children, I mean, small children, when you say frustration, what's that? You know, but it all depends on the person you're talking to.
In whatever conversation, if I'm speaking with someone younger, right? If I'm mentoring a 6th grade student, I'm speaking at a 6th grade level. If I'm with other people, maybe I'll speak in a different way. But what does that mean for us as preaching? What happens when we're preaching or speaking or teaching? Right? It's figuring out at what level are these people. The Austin American Statesman is written at an 8th grade level. Why? Because that way it's accessible to a larger audience.
And if you use a word, you have to kind of define it at their level.
Helping them to understand.
Understand.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood. How do I help people to understand me better?